As the Greeks' impending invasion of their land became known, the Trojans sent pleas for help to their neighboring states. These nearby allies responded valiantly, joining forces to prepare for the imminent threat. With King Priam now too old for the rigors of battle, his eldest son, the courageous and valiant Hector, assumed command of the Trojan army. As the Greek fleet drew near, the Trojans lined the coast, determined to thwart their landing. However, uncertainty pervaded the troops regarding who should be the first to set foot on enemy soil. A prophecy had warned that the first to do so would meet a grim fate. Patroclus of Phylace, though, courageously ignored this ominous prediction, leaped ashore, and fell by Hector's hand. The Greeks managed to establish a beachhead and, in the ensuing battle, the Trojans were decisively defeated. They retreated behind the city's walls for safety. With Achilles leading the Greek forces, a desperate attempt was made to storm the city, but it ended in severe losses. After this setback, the invaders, recognizing the prospect of a protracted and exhausting campaign, beached their ships, set up tents, huts, and an entrenched camp along the coast. Between the Greek camp and Troy lay a plain watered by the Scamander and Simois rivers. It was on this plain, which would become famous in history, that the memorable battles between the Greeks and Trojans unfolded. It became evident to the Greek leaders that taking the city by storm was a near impossible task. The Trojans, outnumbered, refrained from risking a major battle in open terrain. Thus, the war dragged on for years without a decisive encounter. During this period, Odysseus executed a long-planned revenge against Palamedes. Palamedes was one of the wisest, most diligent, and upright of all Greek heroes. His efforts and eloquence had convinced most chiefs to join the expedition. However, these very qualities endeared him to his countrymen while stoking the hatred of his implacable foe, Odysseus. Odysseus had never forgiven Palamedes for exposing his scheme to avoid joining the army. To bring about Palamedes' downfall, Odysseus concealed a substantial sum of money in his tent. He then composed a letter, pretending it was from King Priam to Palamedes. The letter thanked the Greek hero for valuable information and referred to a large sum of money as a reward. When this letter was found on a Phrygian prisoner, it was read aloud during a council of Greek leaders. Palamedes was accused of betraying his country to the enemy, leading to a search of his tent that uncovered a substantial sum of money. He was declared guilty and sentenced to be stoned to death. Fully aware of the treachery against him, Palamedes remained silent, knowing that, faced with such damning evidence, defending himself would be futile. In the initial year of the campaign, the Greeks scoured the nearby territory, looting the surrounding villages. During one such foray, the city of Patroclus fell to pillage. As the commander-in-chief, Agamemnon claimed a beautiful captive, Chryseis, daughter of Chryses, the priest of Apollo, as his share of the spoils. Achilles, in turn, received another captive, the lovely Briseis. The following day, Chryses, eager to ransom his daughter, ventured to the Greek camp. However, Agamemnon dismissed the old man with rude and offensive words, refusing his proposal. Grief-stricken by his daughter's loss, Chryses beseeched Apollo for retribution against her captor. Apollo heeded his plea, casting a dreadful pestilence upon the Greek camp. For 10 days, the plague raged, claiming many lives. Achilles, feeling the weight of responsibility, convened a council and sought counsel from CapCut, the soothsayer, on how to halt this divine punishment. The seer revealed that Apollo had unleashed the plague as retribution for the affront against his priest. Only by returning Chryseis to her father could the gods' wrath be quelled. Agamemnon reluctantly agreed to release the maiden, but given his existing bitterness towards CapCut due to the prediction concerning his own daughter, Iphigenia, he berated the soothsayer and accused him of conspiring against his interests. Achilles sided with CapCut, sparking a fierce quarrel. The dispute escalated to the point where Achilles, consumed by anger, almost struck down his commander. However, Athena intervened in the nick of time, appearing beside Achilles and guiding him back to his senses, unseen by the others. Agamemnon retaliated by confiscating Achilles' beloved captive, Briseis, who had grown deeply fond of her kind and noble captor. She wept as she was torn away from his care. Disgusted by Agamemnon's ungenerous behavior, Achilles retreated to his tent and adamantly refused further involvement in the war. Overwhelmed with sorrow, he sought solace by the sea, invoking the presence of his divine mother, Thetis. In response to his plea, Thetis emerged from the waves, comforting her gallant son. She assured him that she would beseech the mighty Zeus to avenge his grievances by granting victory to the Trojans, teaching the Greeks the profound loss they incurred due to his withdrawal from the army. Upon learning of Achilles' defection through a Trojan spy, the Trojans, bolstered by the absence of this fearless and intrepid leader, whom they feared above all other Greek heroes, grew emboldened. They launched a daring and highly successful assault on the Greeks. Despite the Greeks' resolute defense of their position, they were soundly defeated, retreating to their fortifications. Agamemnon and many other Greek leaders sustained injuries in the battle. With their remarkable and decisive victory, the Trojans pressed on to besiege the Greeks within their camp. Recognizing the grave danger facing the army, Agamemnon temporarily set aside his personal grievances. He dispatched an embassy to Achilles, composed of numerous noble and distinguished chiefs. They earnestly implored him to come to the aid of his compatriots in this dire hour of need. Agamemnon pledged not only to return fair Briseis to him, but also to offer his own daughter's hand in marriage, along with 7 towns, as her dowry. However, the stubborn hero's determination remained unshaken. Although he courteously listened to the messenger's arguments and appeals, his resolve to abstain from further participation in the war remained unwavering. In one of the ensuing engagements, the Trojans, led by Hector, penetrated deep into the heart of the Greek camp. They had already ignited some of the ships when Patroclus, observing the plight of his countrymen, fervently implored Achilles to permit him to lead the Myrmidons to the rescue. Achilles' better nature prevailed, and he not only entrusted his valiant band of warriors to his friend, but also lent him his own suit of armor. Patroclus, now atop Achilles' war chariot, was blessed by Achilles, who raised a golden goblet and poured out a libation to the gods. He earnestly prayed for victory and the safe return of his beloved comrade. As a parting instruction, Achilles cautioned Patroclus not to venture too deeply into the enemy's territory and implored him to focus on saving the ships. At the helm of the Myrmidons, Patroclus launched a determined assault on the enemy. Believing that the invincible Achilles himself led the battalions, the Trojans grew disheartened and fled. Patroclus pursued the retreating Trojans all the way to the walls of their city, wholly disregarding Achilles' advice in the heat of battle. However, his recklessness cost the young hero his life, as he encountered the formidable Hector and met his demise at Hector's hands. Hector stripped the armor from his fallen foe and would have dragged the body within the city if not for the intervention of Menelaus and Ajax the Greater. After a prolonged and fierce struggle, they successfully prevented the desecration of Patroclus's body. The solemn task of informing Achilles about his friend's fate fell upon the Greek warriors. When he received the news, tears flowed freely from his eyes as he grieved over the lifeless body of his comrade. He made a solemn vow that he would not allow funeral rites for Patroclus until he had personally avenged his death by slaying Hector with his own hands and capturing 12 Trojans to be sacrificed on Patroclus's funeral pyre. All other considerations faded into insignificance compared to his burning desire for revenge. Achilles' apathy was shattered, and he reconciled with Agamemnon, rejoining the Greek army. At the request of the goddess Thetis, Hephaestus forged a magnificent new suit of armor for Achilles, surpassing all other heroes in splendor. Adorned in his glorious armor, Achilles strode purposefully through the camp, rallying the Greeks to arms. He led the troops against the enemy, resulting in the Trojans being defeated and forced to flee. Near the city gates, Achilles and Hector finally crossed paths. For the first time in his life, Hector's courage faltered in the presence of his formidable adversary. Facing the imminent approach of his redoubtable foe, he turned and fled for his life, pursued relentlessly by Achilles. The harrowing race circled the city's walls 3 times, within view of the elderly king and queen, who had ascended the walls to observe the battle. Hector tried to reach the city gates during each lap, hoping his comrades would either admit him or protect him from Achilles' assault. However, his adversary, recognizing his intentions, drove him away from the city and implored his comrades not to hurl their spears at Hector, but to leave his vengeance to him. Eventually, exhausted from the relentless pursuit, Hector made a last stand and challenged his foe to single combat. A fierce battle ensued, in which Hector succumbed to his powerful opponent at the Scaean Gate. With his final breath, the Trojan hero prophesied his conqueror's impending demise at the same location. The enraged victor bound Hector's lifeless body to his chariot and dragged it 3 times around the city's walls, before proceeding to the Greek camp. Witnessing this gruesome spectacle, Hector's aged parents released heart-rending cries of agony, which reached the ears of Andromache, his loyal wife. She rushed to the walls, where she saw her husband's lifeless body, bound to the conqueror's chariot. Achilles proceeded to perform the funeral rites in honor of Patroclus. The hero's lifeless body was carried to the funeral pyre by the Myrmidons, fully armed. To accompany him in the afterlife, his dogs and horses were sacrificed. Following this, in accordance with his gruesome vow, Achilles killed 12 brave Trojan captives, who were placed on the funeral pyre. Once the pyre was ignited, Patroclus's bones were carefully collected and placed in a golden urn. The funerary games followed, including chariot races, cestus fighting, a form of boxing, wrestling matches, foot races, and single combats with shields and spears, with the most distinguished heroes participating and contending for the prizes. If you liked the second part of the story about the Siege of Troy, here's another video about what preceded events in this one. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell. Have a mythical day, and thank you for stopping by.